Okay, so this story I could begin in a lot of places. I'm going to choose to begin it in a very classically Yankee New England way and situate it right at Dunkin' Donuts. So we're at Dunkin' Donuts, and it's my senior year of high school, and it's nighttime, and we're in Saco, Maine. And I'm there, and I'm talking with a couple people. I'm talking to my friend Jordan, and I was in a bit of a bad way, going through the kind of adolescent breakup with the first love type of thing. So it was a classic end of senior year kind of purging, and I remember trying to convey that to Jordan, who's a guy that I've known for a long, long time, and brought up awkwardly, dim-wittedly, the theme of loss, trying to connect with him. Jordan had lost his father to cancer a couple years back, and in my state thought that would be a good common ground to find with him. He quickly let me know that the two are not comparable, and I was very grateful for that, but was embarrassed for a little bit. That was one of the two things that I remember on that night, which seemed to be a very innocuous night. Turned out to be a pretty momentous night. There were Jordan. Well, I wasn't in a really good place around that time. I had been living with my aunts. I was kicked out of my parents' house when I was 15 or so. So I was living with my aunt for the final 2 years of high school, one town over. I still going to Old Orchard Beach High School. Jordan was also not in a very good place either. Obviously, his father had passed. He was somebody I grew up with, and we had played music with each other, and we were really close at a certain point, and then we definitely splintered. He was somebody I trusted, but also was somebody who had become this kind of scary dude. Jordan was really wiry, witty, very playful, but at this point of his life was, liable to be on I think he was selling drugs, he was doing drugs, he was in a different world than I was. And the third person there that night was somebody named Moxie, actually. That was his surname. I'm not making that up. It's very convenient for this story. But Moxie was there, and Moxie was Jordan's henchman. He had not always been Jordan's henchman. He had moved to town a couple years prior. He was this slow, lurching, sensitive, awkward, big-bodied kid. I remember when he moved to town, he was wearing this jean jacket with Guns N' Roses and AC/DC pins on it. And over time, he acculturated to the norms and codes of Old Orchard Beach, and started wearing these big hooded sweatshirts and Fila sneakers, and just grew into this kind of tough guy type of thing. It worked for him because nobody really messed with him, and he fell into this relationship with Jordan that was a very interesting power dynamic where Jordan needed some things done, and Moxie was the muscle. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know a lot about Moxie's life, and I didn't know a lot about that world that Jordan was in, but it was something. There was a time when I remember driving into 7-Eleven in my town, and a kid helped me at knife point and asked for my wallet. And I was like, come on. It was this strung out white kid, maybe this tall, and was I just tried to brush by him and just leave him in the lurch, but he was serious. And it wasn't until I dropped Jordan's name that he dropped the knife and let me go. So I knew Jordan was not only in this different world, but he also kind of commanded respect in this world. A little bit about Old Orchard. I'm sure some of you know Old Orchard. It's this very interesting dynamic with tourists because the tourists that do come there are largely Quebecois, and so there is a language difference. So the us versus them thing can be fairly pronounced. The one thing that was a real social code for high school there was a caste system, and the one rule of the caste system was basically don't be poor. If you looked poor in that high school, you would know it. And Moxie was poor. Moxie moved to town. He lived on Ryefield Drive. That was where the trailers were. It was very clear as day. Moxie was like finding this new world for himself where he could slot in. Around that time, I was maybe 12, 13. I was living in one part of town. My sister and I were sharing a room. My parents needed to move. And it was clear to me, they were looking at an apartment. They were looking at a trailer on Ryefield Drive. And I remember pleading with them, you don't know what will happen to me if we move to Ryefield Drive. And they understood. We did not move to Ryefield Drive. It was a battle I kind of won. We moved instead to the other part of town where it was right near the 7-Eleven, and it was very close to the restaurant that my mother worked. My family during that time, I maintained, was not poor. I would tell people that my dad worked for the government, which was technically true. He was a civilian employee, but I did not tell them that he worked at various restaurants at night, waiting tables at Chinese food restaurants or Greek restaurants or pizza places. And my mother was a babysitter, but I also did not, she would wait tables at family-style restaurants in Old Orchard and then in Saco and then the other part of Saco and so on. It was something that around when I was 15, I started working alongside my mother at this restaurant. The family-style restaurant she was working in Old Orchard. And I, hated it, of course. I was working as a busboy. I despised it. And my mother and I were getting along very, very poorly during that time. So that made it really a lot harder. We were at each other's throats all the time, and the number of days that I would go to work where we would get along were really getting overtaken by the number of days that I would go to work, and we wouldn't be speaking to each other at all. I knew she cared for me. I just knew around that time I was like not into being from Old Orchard. I was not into, I was playing in punk bands. I was going to Portland to see, I would bus into Portland to see a band called The Queers from New Hampshire, and then the next week I would bus into Portland to see a band called The Vampire Lesbos from Portland. And my mother had something figured out at that point. She was like, oh my God. And she thought that she like nabbed me, and I remember coming home from school one day to receive a gift, and the gift was this cylindrical cardboard thing, and I opened it up, and it was a poster of Cindy Crawford that she had gotten me in a swimsuit. And she said, "This is for your room." And I was like, what are you doing? That was one of the most awkward gifts I've ever received in my life. So at 15, I'm working there at the restaurant. It's awful. And I see also the way that the ownership group at the restaurant, there's 3 of them, how they treat the waitstaff there, including my mother. My mother's the oldest of the whole team of waitstaff. And they're nice to me. I'm a kid, but there's just these 3 guys, and they all live in the part of town that they're building golf courses near in these larger houses. And I see how tired it makes my mother and how tired it makes everybody else. And I kind of piece together a little bit of like how hard that is. But not so much, because the stuff between my mother and I was pretty it had its own heat to it. After a while, they started borrowing money from me. After a while after that, they stopped paying that back. And then finally, I was kicked out and moved in with my aunts, and things were different. Fast forward to the night in question, the Dunkin' Donuts night. I am there. We leave Dunkin' Donuts. At this point, I'm a few months away from graduating high school, and I've kind of got one toe out. I know I'm going to move to Boston. Pretty broken up about this girl, but who cares? I'm driving around with my friend Jordan and his friend Moxie, and I'm driving this old beat-up Pontiac Bonneville, and we're driving through the streets of Old Orchard in April, and it's dark, and the tourists haven't come yet, and it's still winter-ish. And because I had said that comment, things have been really on edge. Like Jordan and I, again, I don't know what's up with this guy right now. We rarely hang out, and things are pretty hot for him and messy for him, and I've offended him. But that discussion opened up some conversation in the night where we started talking about our families, and we started talking about things that our mothers and fathers had gone through. And at one point, we drive past the restaurant that I had worked at with my mother, and I talked about, in this aggressive way, how I don't support that place, I would never go there again, how shitty they were to my mother and all these other waitresses. And we drive through the downtown Old Orchard area. There's nobody there. At this point, it's nearing midnight. And we drive back, and I'm about to drop people off at their homes, and Moxie's in the back seat. He is this strong, silent Maynard type that does not say anything unless Jordan asks him to. And we drive back past the restaurant in the center of town, and all of a sudden Jordan asked me to pull over. And against some better judgment, I do. About 100 feet past the entrance. And it's this big, sprawling complex with probably seats like 250 people inside. Bunch of parking spaces outside. It's there. It's not there anymore, but it had been there. Jordan gets out of the car, and he instructs Moxie to do that too. Moxie gets out of the back seat, and the both of them walk behind my car to the front of the entrance of this restaurant. And he picks up a stone, or Moxie picks up a stone at Jordan's instruction, and before I know it, I see in the rearview mirror Moxie tossing a stone through one of the great bay windows of this restaurant and shattering the glass. And I'm like, oh shit, this is happening. At that moment, I see in this long, narrow road, the main street in Old Orchard, I see way behind me, headlights appear, kind of cresting over the back of the road. And it's still maybe half a mile back. It's a long, narrow road. Moxie and Jordan run back to my car, get in, and I start I drive a very dutiful 25 miles per hour, and I take a left onto the next street, and I turn my car off, and I know that it's a cop car. When you're that age, you know the headlights of cop cars. You know exactly what they look like. I know that it's a cop car. And we wait there. Moxie and Jordan are kind of exhilarated from this dumb, vagrant act that just happened. And sure enough, I see passing by on the main street, very, very slowly, a police officer, and he passes by, which indicates he did not see what happened. I don't remember what happened the rest of that night. I remember I dropped them off. I needed to get out of that situation. But I know that very quickly, those feelings of guilt and shame and anger that I had toward them dissipated, and vigilante justice not being my thing, still felt this weird pride and gratitude toward them. Moxie, number one, for putting his neck on the line for something that he had no skin in the game for, and two, for Jordan, who, despite not knowing or sharing any of the terms of our lives anymore, still initiating this act, this dumb, vagrant act, on my behalf. I went to sleep. The next morning I drove to school, and as I was driving back, I saw them replacing the window, and I knew that my mother was there working and had no idea the story behind this broken window. And I never told anybody about that. Thank you.